Venus and star blessings, everybody. Let's talk about some current transits that are taking place over this weekend, over the next few days. And I want to just make some comments on some of the phenomena that's occurring on Israel's chart as well. And look, it's very, very complex. There's a lot going on. And if I'd spent hours and hours and hours, I would really bring forth a presentation that went on for hours and hours. So I don't want to do that, but I do want to just highlight some pretty significant passages. I feel, again, the energies are just so extremely heavy. My heart feels really, really, really heavy because of what's happening to so many people over on that side of the world. And it's so easy to get swept up in being divided. So easy, because it's specifically, unfortunately, at that personality level, it's designed in such a way to divide people, because when people are divided, they are weaker. It's as simple as that. When people are united, then unity brings love and balance and equality and consideration and care and understanding. Now, there are a lot of people that are trying to unite together, regardless of which side, they are from, so to speak. But all in all, with the consensus mainstream media, there is a picture being painted that I don't believe is accurate. So what's the thing that we can do about that? Really, I mean, it's so extremely complex, and it does activate a lot of different reactions and responses in all of us. And as I said, if we stay in that position, which is dominated by the mind, primarily the left brain, which comes through with its judgments and narrow perspectives and so forth, we will just be divided and torn inside. And so I feel that at the highest, absolute highest level, that these situations can bring very powerful spiritual teachings to us that are far beyond our personal belief and perspective about anything taking place on the earth. And the spiritual teaching would be that in such a cataclysmic state, to stand in love and unity, and to bring that forth and bring that through in your heart, your mind, and your soul, and reflect that energy. Many, many situations in life offer us that opportunity to raise our consciousness and come from that position. And at the end of the day, that's probably the most powerful thing we could do. Or we can just be divided and attack each other. And being divided and coming from a place of attack and so forth, we can see what the result of that is. And unfortunately, there are so many innocent people that get swept up in that type of storyline. So the eclipse that occurred, is the solar eclipse that occurred is definitely an eclipse that holds a very significant vibration that comes through the lower spheres, because it's an eclipse that was predominantly characterized by Mars and Pluto, two planets of will, two planets that can be explosive in conflict, fighting, and war and power struggles. So at those lower levels, that's unfortunately the result. So the energies are extremely, extremely intense. That particular eclipse happened to fall on the chart of Israel on their ascendant, which meant it activated the entire cross of the chart. I'll show you the chart in a moment. There's a lot of things activating the chart of Israel. At the moment as well, the asteroid Lucifer is in Aries, and that's a very, very powerful asteroid that does bring up evil. And I'm not talking about Lucifer as in the Venus star point, the goddess who's the bearer of light in that context. That's a different Lucifer. There is an asteroid called Lucifer that Jeffrey Wolf Green has written a whole book about. That's it there. And so this is on the archetypal evil energy known as Lucifer. And that asteroid is in all of our charts. It's obviously a moving body, so it transits through the zodiac. And at the moment, it is in Aries. Now, on the 7th of October, it was at about 13 degrees of Aries. Today, as I speak, it's at the 10th degree because it's moving retrograde. That's playing part in this whole story as well. I don't want to make this video about that sort of specific crisis at the moment, but I just want to touch on it a little bit. Primarily today, I want to just talk a little bit about transiting Pluto squaring the Sun, squaring Mercury, and what does that kind of reflect at this point in time, perhaps for our own self and for collective matters as well. So let me just bring up some charts. So I just quickly want to highlight just a couple of things here. As I said, I don't want to spend a great deal of time on this. It's a very heavy subject, and I don't want to focus on the heaviness of it. I don't want to turn a blind eye either, and I haven't. But I do want to bring as much as I can the love that's needed. The Sabian symbol for the lunar eclipse coming up is quite profound as well. So the solar eclipse landed on the ascendant of the chart of Israel. There it is there. The solar eclipse was 21 of Libra. Transiting Pluto at the moment is conjunct the IC. It has been there for some time, actually, because Pluto is past that degree, but it's still close enough to be conjuncted. So therefore, it's opposite the MC. And when we think about it, in the last few years, Pluto has been really activating this entire cross of Israel's chart, because there are 4 cardinal points on this particular chart, the 4 cardinal signs, and Pluto, of course, being in Capricorn, makes a square to Libra, makes a square to Aries, and obviously opposes Cancer. So this whole chart has been activated for quite some time, actually. Transiting Uranus is conjunct the Sun of Israel. The lunar eclipse in Taurus that's coming up is very, very significant for this chart, because when you apply absolute longitude on the globe of the Earth, the lunar eclipse that's coming up in Taurus is at 5 degrees of Taurus. 5 degrees of Taurus translates to Israel's sun of 23 degrees. I'm talking about absolute longitude. So that's just another method to use to ascertain how, in this case, this eclipse might be impacting this particular chart, for instance. So the solar and lunar eclipse of this half of the year are extremely important and powerful for what's happening to Israel and Gaza and so on and so forth. Eclipses, particularly solar eclipses, tend to animate things on the external physical level in quite a severe way when they do hit off something, you know, in the collective or in the individual chart or in a country's chart. Not every eclipse does that, obviously, because we have several eclipses every year, and if every eclipse had a cataclysmic nature to it for the entire world and for every individual, we just wouldn't survive. It'd just be too much. So there's, you know, very specific alignments that activate very specific passages in time for very specific reasons. So this is primarily some of the highlights of what's happening to Israel's chart. And transiting Lucifer, as I said, is sitting here at 13 degrees of Aries. It was 13 degrees of Aries on the 7th of October. Today, it's 10 degrees, so it's exactly opposite Neptune. And I think that just the opposition of transiting Lucifer to Neptune says a lot about perhaps the positions, perspectives, projections that are going on about this matter on both sides. One thing that Jeffrey says about Lucifer in Aries is that because in evolutionary astrology specifically, Jeffrey really brings in the reminder, the very powerful reminder and truth that when you're looking at a particular archetype, you always must include its polarity point, because there's an axis there, there's a polarity point, and so those 2 points are never separate. They're always, they're each other's shadow, you could say. So Libra is obviously the opposite point of Aries, right? And of course, Libra always speaks to the cultivation of balance. Now, whether that's achieved or not is another story, but that's one of the ultimate aims of Libra, to bring about balance, to restore balance, to integrate it, to embody it, and so forth. And Aries is obviously the complete opposite, which is primarily about, well, it's about a lot of different things, but in this particular context, with the asteroid Lucifer in Aries, it can act in extremely evil ways, because it is Aries, which is ruled by Mars, which is the god of war. Aries at the lowest level is all about itself, and it's going to push everyone and everything out the way to get what it wants. Aries wants what it wants when it wants it, and at an unconscious level, unconscious, selfish level, that is a very explosive energy. So it's intriguing to me that Lucifer at the moment is in Aries and happens to be forming this opposition to Neptune in Israel's chart. And one thing that Jeff says is, because the higher octave of Aries is Scorpio, in brackets, manipulation, he says the antidote through the Libran polarity point is to realize that other people's needs and realities are equally important as one's own. It's changing from a consciousness of using people for one's own purposes to a consciousness of giving to someone in accordance with what the person actually needs, instead of the delusion. Now, that may sound a little bit out of context, because it sort of is, because I'm not reading you know, the several pages, because it's not the way this is written. It's not written in such a format where you have Aries in Lucifer. Lucifer in Taurus, Lucifer in Gemini. It's written in a conversational format because it was a live lecture and it's just been transcribed. So that particular statement comes from a context of some other comments about Lucifer in Aries. But I really just wanted to highlight that particular statement because it's quite profound from the point of view of understanding the Aries Libra polarity and how this polarity might be activated in the consciousness of the ether, let's say at the moment, with Lucifer transiting through Aries. And really, you know, he's just pointing to becoming more conscious, right, of accommodating and understanding other people's perspectives, beliefs, values. Libra. Lucifer, according to Jeff, you know, all in all, is an evil archetype, but it does have a flip side that can evolve into light, actually. But when it's operating at that very unconscious personality level, it's pure evil, simply put. The Sabian symbol for the lunar eclipse coming up, which I'm actually going to do a video for the lunar eclipse, but it is quite intriguing that this Sabian symbol for the Taurus lunar eclipse coming up, which in absolute longitude, according to the longitude lines running across the globe, if you like, in the point of where Taurus aligns with Tel Aviv, Israel, which is 5 degrees of Taurus translates to 23 degrees of Taurus. That longitude translates to that position of the sun in their chart. So the symbol is cantilever bridge across a deep gorge. The conquest of separativeness through group cooperation. I think that that keynote just, you know, it says it all, right? With what's happening to people on one side. We know, you know, we all know what's happening. I don't need to describe those details, but I think that particular keynote really encapsulates what's going on. It talks about the person who has suffered deprivation and loneliness can give new substance to his or her emotional life by participating in a collective project. All great evolutionary challenges imply the overcoming of basic difficulties. A step ahead must be taken, yet an abyss confronts evolving man. An abyss. Those people are most certainly facing an abyss on the one side. Now, I'm not saying the other side is not facing their dilemmas and their problems. You know, both sides have a story. Both sides are experiencing different things. And I don't want to make it a this side, that side, you know, this side versus this side. As I said from the very beginning, I want to bring in love. And that's what we all need to bring in to support these transitions that are unfortunately extremely severe in cataclysmic in nature. So anyway, I think the Sabian symbol for the lunar eclipse is quite telling. Now, the solar eclipse rather, which is, you know, we are still within that vibration. We haven't even had the lunar eclipse yet. So we're just sort of in that first week, if you like, of the solar eclipse, which was at 21 Libra, which does form a close conjunction to Spica. Now, Spica is one of the most powerful stars in justice and spiritual protection. Now, how is that fixed star helping out in this situation? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I guess we'll have to Sorry, this this Zoom thing has created some new bar, and I'm unable to work out how to clear stuff. There we go. Yeah, it's just shifted around, so I'm just adjusting to the shift. As I was saying, how is that fixed star helping at this point in time? I guess we'll just have to wait and see, because one of the key points about Spica is that even though there might be something really difficult that comes up, you know, whether you're looking at an individual chart or a chart of a nation or whatever it is, there can be injustices that occur, but there's some other protection going on that you may not see at the time, and the balance is restored at some point, right? So we'll have to just kind of watch that. But I guess, you know, on the other hand, if we go to a Babylonian chart, so this is a chart for today, the 21st of October, which is the day I'm doing this presentation. This is the Babylonian zodiac, and there's Spica and there's Arcturus, which both those stars actually were very close to the solar eclipse, more specifically Spica. So let me just find. So if you look in this little window to the left here, when I actually hover over a particular, anywhere I hover over in this chart, it picks up the degrees and the sign of where things are placed. So there's Spica right there, but even though you see the name, it's very faint. Some people might not be able to see it. So this, unfortunately, it's very hard to see everything very, very clearly on this chart. It takes a while to get your eyes to adjust to it, but I'm getting more familiar with it. So there's a little dot just above the S, and so that's the actual position of Spica. It's actually, yeah, it's just literally there, which is 23 degrees of Libra in the tropical zodiac. But that is at 28 degrees of Virgo in the Babylonian zodiac. So I think we kind of need to consider both, actually. Now, in the Babylonian fixed zodiac, 27 degrees of Libra is, let's bring up solar fire again, forms a trine to Pluto, right? Virgo to Capricorn, Earth to Earth, trine. So that's encouraging. But in the tropical zodiac, Spica sits at about 23 Libra, which was conjunct the solar eclipse. Again, that's also promising, because it is Spica at the end of the day, and Spica is it is known to be one of the most fortunate stars, actually. When we say fortunate, though, it's important to understand that it's not a star of the material world. So it's not about attaining material wealth and success on those levels. It's a spiritualized star, spiritual star, for lack of a better word. The gifts and blessings that are bestowed by Spica, either to an individual or a group or the earth itself, are from the richest, highest levels of spirit. So it's really about tuning into and adapting to those sorts of blessings and abundances that must go beyond the personality, the ego, the mind, the desires of what we want and what our mind judges as right or wrong. And anyway, Spica is about justice at the end of the day as well. So it will translate through into the material plane in some kind of way, but fundamentally there's an undeniable level of protection by Spica. And as I said, at the moment, you know, we can't see everything that's going on. Even if we were in that part of the world, we still wouldn't be able to see everything that's going on, because for the most part, most of us, we don't have the privy of knowing everything that spirit is up to, so to speak. We try to understand it from our intelligence or mind, wisdom, things like that. And sometimes we do connect to something and grasp on something that's quite profound and meaningful, that may assist us in understanding and understanding. But overall, there's so much that we don't know. That's a fact. Doesn't matter how many PhDs you have or how wise you are, there's so much that we cannot see, because we live in a physical, dense reality. It's just the nature of this earth plane. The other thing that I want to say as well, which I've mentioned before, Mars is invisible. And Mars invisible is not an easy passage, and it will be invisible till January of next year. It went invisible depending on your location on Earth, because it is based on latitude. Mars went invisible late September sometime. So when Mars was invisible, these cataclysmic events took place in ways where things happened. How can I describe it? I don't want to make definitions or labels on any of that, really, but I just want to say that, by the way, this is how you can see Mars is invisible. It's grey. See it right here with an X next to it. Mercury is also invisible. So this is a program that shows you when a planet is visible or invisible, right? Which happens to all planets at some point. And in, you know, ancient Babylonian astrology, especially, the invisibility and visibility of any planet is highly significant and has very specific meanings associated to that process, that journey. They're called heliacal phases. So Mars invisible, very simply put, would imply that people's agendas and motivations and desires come from a very hidden position. And as a matter of fact, about a week and a half ago, I had an incident that occurred. I won't go into the story or the details, but I'll go into a little bit of it. Somebody stole my purse, which is quite an invasive thing, quite a big, because your purse is, it's not about the money, and I had no money in it anyway. It is about the personal items that one might have in their purse or wallet, and I had a lot of personal things in there. Anyway, that was, I can't prove it, but my instincts never lie. So that happened to me while Mars was invisible, by the way, from somebody I know who was sitting right next to me. So yeah, that's a very small thing in comparison, obviously, to these you know, very, very severe and tragic events that are going on the Earth plane. But I'm just simply pointing out to how Mars being invisible can act in a personal, individual manner, and it can certainly act out in a collective manner, as it is right now. So, and Ruman mentioned that as well when we did the video on Mars in Babylonian astrology. Some comments that were mentioned there were about the what's the potential of Mars being invisible? What are some of the likely manifestations of that kind of energy, if you like? We talked a little bit about that. And, you know, Mars in Babylonian astrology is known as Nergal, which was a god of the underworld, god of death. So, yeah, there's a lot of symbolism when you look at a lot of different things. Furthermore, Mars is in Scorpio at the moment, approaching to a conjunction to Ceres in Scorpio, and I did speak about this briefly, I think, in my last video, so I won't unpack it again, but I just want to highlight that I said that this would be possibly a lot of grief and loss that would occur. And indeed, unfortunately, that is exactly what has happened and is happening. So that's there in the picture as well. The other thing is that Vesta, transiting Vesta, is in Cancer. And Israel actually have Vesta in Cancer in their chart, right up here on the midheaven. In fact, it's the closest body to the midheaven. Now, Vesta is not easy to read because it's typically not an archetypal energy that is obvious on the physical plane. It has very much to do with spirituality, inner work, soul work, and things like that. But in Cancer, it does feel to me, well, Vesta speaks to devotion as well. And in terms of Israel and, the people of Israel, they seem to be a very devoted tribe of people to their own culture and belief system. I think that's what Vesta is reflecting here. But it's interesting that they will soon be having a Vesta return. And I think that's going to be quite significant given the times we are in at the moment. What is it going to mean exactly? I'm not sure. But I think it plays a picture for sure, plays a part of the picture. There's something very powerful about this moon in Leo, Pluto in Leo, Saturn in Leo. Pluto-Saturn conjunction in Leo really describes, I think, the history of these people. I won't go into that though at the moment. I didn't want to make this a delineation of Israel's chart, but there were just some things that I thought were worth mentioning. So finally, I just want to talk a little bit about the square at the moment between the Sun and Pluto, which of course is a collective transit that impacts the world and impacts us individually. I think the first thing perhaps to bring up is that, well, this is a last quarter square. And the reason it's a last quarter square is because out of the two planets, the Sun is the fastest moving one. So it is the Sun that will ultimately catch up to Pluto again. And when it does, it will form a conjunction, right? So Pluto was conjunct the Sun, basically in January of this year when the Sun was in Capricorn, December, January. And so it's just traveled, around the zodiac. It got to being opposite Pluto in July. I don't know what's going on here with this new little, these new, and what are they called? Annotations. Anyway, never mind. So, at the moment, the Sun has reached the midpoint in the zodiac. It's in Libra. That's the midpoint, isn't it? It starts in Aries. The halfway point is Libra. And so that's relative to the angle of where Pluto is. That's called a last quarter square. I just want to read you this comment. This is from the lunation cycle, Dane Ruggiero. Now, Dane Ruggiero is the one who has coined these particular phrases connecting to the 8 phases of the lunation cycle, sun-moon cycle. But the meaning of that he has associated to each of those phases can also be understood when any 2 planets are in this particular phase as well. So in this case, the phase here is a last quarter square, right? Which happens to be the same for the moon and the sun. Actually, you can see the moon's in Capricorn. The new moon was in Libra, solar eclipse. So the moon has moved away. It's now at that position of being last quarter square. Or actually, it's first quarter square rather, because it's It's only several days after the lunar eclipse. Anyway, going back to Pluto Sun, because that's the main focus here. And I'm really just going to read just a sentence or two. While the first quarter type represents basically a state of crisis in action, so the first quarter square, according to Dane Rudhyar, corresponds to what he terms crisis in action. They're both crisis points, last quarter, first quarter, but the first quarter brings about a crisis that's externalized because it's associated to action, whereas the last quarter square is an internal process. And here's what he says, just briefly. This last quarter type, meaning the last quarter square, is essentially characterized by a tendency to experience crisis in consciousness. Now, that sometimes I think that term is very difficult for people to understand. What does it mean to say there is a crisis in consciousness? So I like to sometimes replace that word with crisis in thinking, because it just brings it down to perhaps a more relatable way of understanding what a last quarter square means or implies. Then he says, at least what seems mainly important to these people, meaning a last quarter square energy, is the embodiment of their ideological beliefs in definite systems of thought and or concrete institutions. And he just goes on, because the rest of it is really, it's written in a way where it's talking about if you were born with a lunation phase, the sun and moon in your chart, if they were in a last quarter square, that's how he's speaking to the last quarter square through this book. So I won't read the rest of it because it's the way it's written, perhaps it won't make sense for what we're talking about here. But I guess all you need to really understand from that is that the last quarter square implies being inflexible and rigid based on your own beliefs, and unable to see and understand other people's beliefs and where they're coming from and so forth. So it's that very idealistic, almost righteous kind of this is what I see, this is what's believed, this is how it should be. And the last quarter square, because it's a square, it's saying no, we've got to adjust our perspective, we've got to adjust our thinking, we've got to adjust our beliefs, we've got to break through these molds that are ancient, you could say, and we've got to start transforming what we once held as an ultimate truth or belief, and understand that we are always evolving, everything is evolving, the earth, every individual, and so forth. That's what the last quarter square points to. But it's more of it can be felt as an internal struggle of you're trying to hold on to this position here because this is how you are conditioned to think and perceive and believe, and that the crisis comes in and the tension and conflict comes in because there needs to be a complete change on that stance. Now we can just simply apply that to the world, right? So I guess at a personal individual level, this would perhaps highlight just matters in our own life. Now if this is related to our own stance and perspective on our perception to what is happening with these critical events at the moment, it might be that we need to adjust our perspective as well. We may need to let go of some of our own conditional perspectives and biases and things of that nature. And it may also mean, experiencing conflicting conversations, because Mercury is in the picture as well. Mercury is square Pluto too. And Mercury square Pluto can most certainly be conflicting perspectives. And both people want to stand in the position of power with their own perspective and their own thoughts and their own words and their own beliefs. and there's a conflict, there's a clash here. So it, you know, it is an energy that can stir a lot of that up. And the more unconscious people are, the more the conflict will arise. But I guess, you know, for us as individuals, if we want to bring some peace and some awareness and some objectivity to matters and some balance and harmony, Sun in Libra, Mercury in Libra, then we need to check in with the position within ourselves that we are holding. Maybe that position is not serving the highest good of everybody. Maybe it's an outdated position. Maybe we need to change something in the way we are seeing things. These are all questions that we can be asking ourselves. But it takes objectivity, awareness, and it requires us to step out of the left linear mind, where we have prejudices and biases and all those sorts of things, and try and employ right brain, which is Sagittarius, of course, which brings in intuition, rather than just believing in something that is conditioned in your own mind or is just being projected through propaganda and so forth, right? We all have the free will to exercise our choice in what we will participate in, whether it's through our mind or through our actions or through our heart. We all have that choice all the time. So those are the main things I wanted to bring up today. And also a reminder that, you know, Venus is the morning star. The morning star is the goddess of war. And here we are in a situation where there is very severe war going on. So again, you know, as I said at the beginning, you know, I feel a really visceral heaviness with what's going on. And it's, you know, we're all feeling it in different ways, I have no doubt, you know, and especially people who are really sensitive, really empathetic, really compassionate. I think it is much harder for those people. That's not to say that people who are not as sensitive are not good people or anything like that, but some people are just, you know, way more softer, way more sensitive, and these sorts of events, you know, can really get to those people a lot. And I'm certainly one of those people. So I have to remind myself to focus on beauty and love and things that bring happiness. And so I went and bought some beautiful flowers today, just because that's a beautiful reminder that there still is beauty in the chaos, you know, that there still exists beauty, because in the chaos there will be, yes, there is complete, utter darkness in certain ways, but there will be so much love that will come through that as well, from us, from how we might support, understand, listen to, send love. You know, we can all do that, and everything counts. Nothing goes unnoticed by the divine. And, you know, it is when there are cataclysmic things going on, these are spiritual initiations for all of us, because the initiation can be described in very complex terms, but to put it very simply, it would be, will you choose hatred and anger and violence, or will you choose love and compassion and empathy and raise your own consciousness and vibration? That's the spiritual initiation, to come closer to the divine source creation to all things. The opposite is to be all consumed by the physicality, cataclysmic nature of things, and fall sort of be trapped into the darkness of it all, and then you become a part of that darkness. So again, you know, it's up to us. We all have that opportunity. Just one final little quick thing. There was an opposition with Saturn and Venus in the last sort of week or so. And I had an experience with that, which was really interesting. Long story short, I went on a date, and it just took one date to realize this is not my person at all. But I found it quite uncanny that it was under a Saturn-Venus opposition, which is a Saturn-Venus opposition is not the most pleasant passage at all. But the good thing about this passage, well, at least for me anyway, and I wonder if any of you relate, was that it just made me see the clarity and the reality of the lack of potential of this particular situation, this date that I went on. So I just saw the Saturn, in other words, that the best thing came out of the Saturn energy being opposing Venus in that instance, which was to see the situation very, very clearly, which is what Saturn does. Saturn sobers us up. It sobers the situation, right? It gives you the hardcore reality of what's there in front of you, and it gives you an opportunity to see that. And so basically I didn't have to waste my time. Long story short. So anyway, that's, you know, that's like a minuscule thing, but I'm bringing that up because it's very interesting to observe, you know, the transits, for instance, amongst so many other different things that are going on astronomically and so forth. But just little passages like this, they can teach you so much about yourself. Not only understanding how to interpret these symbols and these cycles, but also to understand where you are in your life at this point in time, and how much you might have grown, because in the past you might have just kept on going in this situation that it was clear from the beginning that it was never going to work, but you might have just persisted for whatever reason that was. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, we are at different stages in life where we have different levels of awareness and insight, and accordingly make different decisions, right? Now, this weekend, what's going to happen is Venus is going to trine Jupiter. And Jupiter is in Venus's sign, so that's a one-way reception. That helps because Venus is in her, she's in her fall in Virgo. So it's not the strongest position for Venus, but, you know, again, and I did say I'd come and talk about Venus in Virgo. I'm not sure I'll have time now because, yeah, just time has gone in the way that it has. But Venus in Virgo, you know, in her fall, but can bring the reality of the Venus matters in our life. I don't think that's such a terrible thing. And the trine to Jupiter, of course, that's only there for a day or two, but that can just be a really lovely, this could be a lovely weekend where you might just feel the Jupiter-Venus energy harmoniously vibrating together, forming a trine, right? Which is just enjoyment, really. You know, could just be enjoying a person you're with, reading a book, enjoying a particular activity, or just feeling a little bit more hopeful and optimistic. Jupiter. It's just a very small passage, but, you know, they're little windows that can bring in some harmony or some joy or some greater meaning to situations that we are witnessing or going through ourselves. You know, that's all, just very simple. Right, so I think that's about it. I will be back with the lunar eclipse in Taurus, which I think is Not going to be an easy eclipse, I'm not going to lie. Because the sun is conjunct Mars in Scorpio at that time. So it's going to be some pretty challenging energies, I think, for these two eclipses and the windows of timing of these, because a solar eclipse has a window of 6 months, 3 months either side of the date. So we're really looking at the, almost the rest of this year of these energies still being animated, But again, like I said, we do have the free will to invest our energy, our focus in what we choose to. Regardless of what's appearing and then disappearing. It's just that point of awareness, that point of going within and just really being aware of what the mind is sort of consuming and where it's distracting you and what directions it's taking you towards. I mean, a simple method for that is to, when you're having a thought about something, just ask yourself the question, well, is this particular thought, first of all, is it the truth? Is it happening? And what is it doing to my body, to my central nervous system, to my heart? How is it making me feel? And if the answer is, well, it's distressing and it's jolting me around, it's decentering me and so forth, well, then the question might be, is that a good thought to sit with and to, nurture, as it were, and just sort of be fixated on it? The opposite to that would be to have a loving thought, do something that brings some kind of harmony or love or joy, and whether that's listening to music or playing with your children or your pets, whatever it is, we have to find some balance in what's going on, just even within ourselves. It doesn't mean that we don't care or we're not aware or we're not paying attention, but there has to be balance with what we are focused on and how we are bringing some clean energy to our own heart and how we are providing self-care to ourselves. Because, and I love to use this analogy because it's a great one, when you're in an aircraft, the flight attendants, which I used to be one of those back a long time ago, the instructions are, if something does happen and the oxygen mask drops and you have a child with you, a baby, the instructions are to give oxygen to yourself first before you even give it to your baby. Why might that be? The simple answer is that if you don't take care of yourself first, you certainly cannot take care of anything else or anybody else. That's a fact. So I'll see you guys soon with the lunar eclipse in Taurus discussion. Sending you all much love, much peace to everybody. And that's all I can say. Much love and much peace.